Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
Hello, my name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z-O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 224th episode of Back Look Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. Except for today. But getting back to that, if you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends about Back Look Cinema. Now, I am back from an unscheduled break. It was a break that I didn't know I was going to take. It was longer than I expected it to be. And it was a situation where my work schedule is, it was going crazy and it's still going crazy. And it's also a situation where I had a scare where I thought I lost the use of my computer and a combination of a bunch of different things. And also, I don't know, have you ever felt like you're kind of trapped in a rat race and you're ready to get off the Ferris wheel, or you're ready to get off the what do you call those things? The thing that you run on, the running machine. Yeah, you're ready to get off the running machine. And so it was like a combination of things where I had to take a step back and kind of get some reconstitution to refocus on my efforts to try to get a breath of fresh air. So in that, I stepped back from recording, and now I'm back. I'm back recording. And this episode was supposed to be about Quigley Down Under. And I've decided to push that back maybe to next week or maybe a couple of weeks because there was a couple of other things that happened in the interim. I watched a couple of movies that have a lot to do with the nostalgia that I appreciate when I was growing up. So I wanted to take a look at those things. So there were two movies that came out. One was related to a video game series that I loved when I was growing up, and one was related to a cartoon series that I loved when I was growing up. And it was also a cartoon that generated, well, both of these properties generated movies that I watched back in the day. And one of them I talked about on this show, and another one I talked about on another podcast that I also had, well, the creators of that podcast had given me the grace to allow me to play their episode where I share my thoughts on that movie on this feed. So the first one was that I'm going to talk about is Masters of the Universe that just came out this year. Both of these movies I'm going to talk about spoiler free. And the second one that I want to talk about is Mortal Kombat 2. And I've talked about the first film adaptation of Masters of the Universe that came out in the 1980s. And that was the one I talked about on Not a Bomb podcast. And we had talked about whether or not it deserved to be a bomb. And so if you want to hear the verdict on that, I encourage you to go to I encourage you to go to Not a Bomb podcast and check that out. But that was the episode that they shared with me that you could also hear on this feed. And the second one is Mortal Kombat 2. There was a movie, Mortal Kombat 2, that came out in, I think, the 1980s or maybe the 1990s. And so both of these are sequels. The original adaptation that came out in the earlier decades, I did not talk about that one on this podcast. I talked about Mortal Kombat, the first movie, but I didn't talk about Mortal Kombat 2. And the reason was I was not thoroughly impressed with Mortal Kombat 2. There were some things that I liked about it, but ultimately I was like, I did not want to talk about that movie on this podcast. But there was recently Mortal Kombat 2 that came out in 2026, and I do want to talk about that one. So these two films are nostalgia related. Like, once again, this is going to be spoiler free. And I'm going to talk about Masters of the Universe first. And when you want to, if you want to skip me talking about Masters of the Universe, I will leave a way where you could skip to Mortal Kombat if you'd rather listen to that, and they'll be set up as chapters. So just skip to the next chapter, and then you can hear all about my thoughts, my spoiler-free thoughts on Mortal Kombat. So let's check out Masters of the Universe. Masters of the Universe had many stars that I didn't recognize, and a lot of new talent, or at least to me, they're new talent. So there are people like Nicholas Galazine, who played Prince Adam and He-Man, or Adam Glenn and He-Man. Kamala Mendes played Teela. Idris Elba played Duncan. Jared Leto played Skeletor. Johannes Hawkor Johannesson played Fisto. John Z. Zhang played Rhyme Man. Alison Brie played Evelyn. Sam C. Wilson played Trapjaw. Charlotte Rae played Queen Marlena. James Purfoy played King Randor. Morena Baccarin played the Sorceress. Christian Wiig played Roboto. Christiane Beatrice played Diane, I'm not exactly sure. Artie Wilkinson Hunt played Young Adam. Ari Farrell played Young Teela. This film was directed by Travis Knight, and it was written by Chris Butler, Aaron Nee, and Adam Nee. I guess they're brothers. They have the same last name. It feels to me like they're siblings. And I'm not familiar with Travis. I've heard people talk about this movie in other videos, and it seems that he has done some movies that I'm familiar with. So I'm going to take a look at his IMDb right quick to see that he's done Kubo and the Two Strings, Paranormal, and I'm familiar with those, though I haven't seen them. And he also did Missing Link, which I am completely unfamiliar with. It looks like he's the type of director who would be good at a movie like this. It's basically a cartoon brought to life. And so if you want to have a director direct a movie that's basically a cartoon brought to life, this is the type of movie that you would want him to do. As I mentioned before, this is the second live action attempt for Masters of the Universe. I originally had my doubts about this movie when I first saw the trailers. And one of the reasons I had my doubts is because they obviously had Prince Adam, and it seemed like Prince Adam was on Earth. And I was like, I did not want another adventure of the Masters of the Universe on Earth. And so I appreciated like the colors and the costumes, but I didn't want, like, we got that in the original adaptation. I didn't want to see that again. And then as they showed more of the story trailers, I started to understand what the story was about, and it seemed like there was going to be a lot more action on Eternia, so I got a little bit more excited about this movie. My main problem was with the original was that it was set on Earth. They didn't have a whole bunch of characters from the cartoons or toys. Like, what are we doing? Why don't we have the action figures that we played with in the movie? Like, the whole purpose of the cartoon was to sell toys. It was naked. It was like, it's not like they were really hiding it, and it's like they were so. The toy company, I think it was Mattel, was so upfront about it that they had to put like public service announcements at the end of the cartoon. A lot of cartoons did this in the 80s. And I remember G.I. Joe did it. Strangely enough, Transformers never did it. But some of the cartoons would have these public service announcements, a lesson that children were supposed to learn. that was in the cartoon. They would tell you the theme of the cartoon, like maybe it was about selfishness, or maybe it was about stealing, or or something like that, and how children are not supposed to do that. There are still themes or memes, I should say. There are memes floating on the internet of Skeletor doing one of these public service announcements, but the memes are more about what's going on today and not what the lessons of that particular cartoon was supposed to be. So, yeah. So when I watched the original, like, where's Stratos? Where's Man? Where's Manny Faces? Where's Triclops? Where's Trapjaw? Where's Merman? What about Cringer or Battle Cat? Like, none of the main characters were there, except for He-Man, Skeletor, and some version of Beastman. And I think Evelyn and the Sorceress, some of the main characters, but not all of the supporting characters. So Travis Knight's Masters of the Universe gave me the movie that I had wanted to see in the 80s. It was so colorful. It had the right kind of campy energy. It was a great combination of action and humor. It was a pretty decent story that wrapped it all together. I thought the setting was good for the most part. I felt like the characters with Adam and Teela and Duncan they had satisfying character arcs. I really like how they went through an effort to make all of these characters like as rounded as they could. I think that the protagonists, or I'm sorry, the antagonists, they were mostly flat characters, but this story isn't about them. And even as flat characters, they were still entertaining. Jared Leto's Skeletor was one of the most entertaining. I know there's a lot of stuff going on about Jared Leto, and we're kind of living in this world where, or at least, especially older people, particularly, finding out how many of the people that they admire, they're engaged in either bad behavior or criminal behavior, and we gotta sit with that. And Jared Leto is just like a latest example of somebody who's engaged in possibly criminal behavior, but at the same time, he's still good at acting. So that is a problem. And there's a lot of conversation about separating the art from the artist, and that's not something that I am capable of doing. And I don't have the hate, like, people who don't like Jared Leto for what he's doing outside of acting automatically transfers that as like I don't like the dude and he can't act. It's like, I'm not going to say that he can't act, and I'm not going to say that he did a horrible job, and I'm not all that familiar with his possibly criminal activity. I'm just saying that he did a pretty decent job as Skeletor, and maintained Skeletor's goofy energy. Like, he's goofy in a cartoon, and he's rather goofy in this movie. Going back to the earlier Skeletor from the 1980s, Frank Langella, he played Skeletor, and he played a more serious tone, and he was also the best thing about that movie. I mean, he really carried that film. He made the film worth watching. And I'm not saying that Leto lives up to that, but he definitely did I think, a fantastic job as Skeletor in this movie. I'm also very impressed with Nicholas Galizine's Prince Adam. I really liked his characterization. It's slightly different from what you might know from the cartoons, but I like that it was a full character, and I like the way he carried the film. And it's different from in the original movie, where you had Dolph Lundgren play He-Man. He-Man was just really a flat character with no character development. He was just kind of there, and the movie really wasn't about the masters of the universe. It seemed that, at least in that first film, they had some Earth characters that the audience was supposed to relate to, and it was really about the Earthlings' journey, and the the characters from Eternia were just more like they were just facilitating the journey of the Earth characters. But in this movie, the story is actually about Prince Adam and his journey, and I really love the way Nicholas Galazine uh, really embodied the character, and all the other actors did a really great job. I really like Camila Mendez as Tila. Idris Elba is is an absolute diamond when it comes to this movie, because he's absolutely he he did the same way. I think he was, like, for me, the anchor of this film, and the way he had more of the emotional weight, even though he's playing a character that has trouble sharing his emotions, and that he had probably the steepest character arc that he had to carry. They really did get a star actor to play the part that Duncan needed to play. It was really fantastic. I also want to shout out Daniel Pemberton's score for the Masters of the Universe. It was basically a tribute to Queen, and it was Queen inspired. There was a lot of electric guitar and synthesizer that was incorporated that accompanied the orchestral arrangement, and it was fantastic. It's like he knew what the assignment was, and also they actually use some music from Queen. I think in a way it kind of incorporated the feeling of the Flash Gordon movie that came out in the 1980s that was a Queen soundtrack. And I believe that the filmmakers, including Daniel Pemberton, they wanted to have that feeling of the Flash Gordon Queen soundtrack and implant it in this movie. And I think they were very successful in that. And also, to round it up, I love the costumes and the visual effects. That was all fantastic. There's some of the things I didn't like as well. I didn't really get into Alison Brie's Evelyn. It felt like she was uncertain of how to play Evelyn. There were times when I don't know. It felt inconsistent and maybe a little weak, and so I felt like that might have been a stronger performance. And this is coming from somebody who, like, I'm not somebody who is really good at judging acting. As if I am enjoying the film and I am enjoying the characters in the film, then I tend to like the acting that I'm seeing, and I don't really have any judgment for the actors. I think that one of the things that happens is that if the actor's making choices that sort of takes you out of the film, or their actions seem confusing, that's one of the things that I might look at and think that the acting could have, or the actor could have made different decisions or could have taken different directions. So I am not certain. I'm not, well, I'm not 100% certain. But again, these are just opinions of somebody who just went to see a movie, and your mileage may vary. But in my estimation, I think Brie could have made some different decisions as Evelyn. There were some confusing plot points, like the plot of the story wasn't 100% groovy. There were some points in there that were a little bit confusing, but not enough to derail the film. Overall, I was thoroughly entertained, and I was entertained the entire time. It was like the entire time I was watching the movie, I was basically had a smile on my face. So I really felt like, and it's kind of a shame because I know that the movie isn't doing well financially, and that it's not doing well financially means several things. It means it's probably not going to get a sequel. It's and it's weird because it's just going to be one of those movies that was good that many people just didn't go out to see. It could mean that not only that this isn't going to get a sequel, but we're not going to see we're not going to see a lot of other films like this. Like another previous film that was like this was Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, and that was also a fun movie to watch. It had a great story, it had great acting, great characters. It had a great story. It had all the things that you needed for a film to be successful, except the box office numbers. The great quality of that movie did not generate a box office that perhaps the filmmakers were expecting. So what does that mean? That means that they're not making a sequel to Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, and it might mean that they're not going to make many more fantasy films. Fantasy films tend to be a little bit more expensive because they require special effects. They require complicated set buildings. They need more elaborate costumes. They need a lot of things in order to tell a story in a fantasy setting. And if people aren't going to go out and watch these fantasy movies, then we're going to get less fantasy films. And it makes me a little sad because I love fantasy movies. The people who watched it did enjoy it. So on IMDb, it has a 7.0, which for IMDb is very high, especially for a film that just came out. On Rotten Tomatoes, the score is 78 from the critics and 87 from the audience. So that is Masters of the Universe. And obviously, these are my own thoughts. Tell me what you thought about Masters of the Universe. My email is friends@backlickcinema.com, or you can contact me on the socials at backlickcinema on X or Twitter or Threads or any of the other socials that might be out. So let's move on to Mortal Kombat 2. Mortal Kombat 2 has a lot of returning actors to the movie, and then one new major actor. So, like, some of the new actors would be Adeline Rudolph as Kitana, and a new star, Kyle Urban, as Johnny Cage. We also have Martin Ford as Shao Kahn, Tati Gabrielle as Jade, Jessica McNamee as Sonya Blade, McCade Brooks as Jax Briggs, Ludi Lin as Liu Kang, Josh Lawson as Kano, Tadanobu Asano as Lord Raiden, Chen Han as Shang Tsung, Damon Harriman as Quan Chi, Joe Townsend as Bi-Han, Haruyuki Sanada as Hanzo Hasashi or Scorpion, Max Huang as Kung Lao, Louis Tan as Cole Young, J.C. Bloomfield as Baraka, Anna Thu Gwyn as Queen Sindo, and Sophia Zhu as young Kitana. It was directed by Simon McQuoid, and it was written by Jeremy Slater, Ed Boon, and John Tobias. I'm pretty sure that Ed Boon and John Tobias got credits because they were the inventors and writers of the original Mortal Kombat. I'm not exactly sure if they had significant input in this movie, but they are why we watched this movie, is because they created the original Mortal Kombat video game. Also, I'm going to start right off and talk about the music by Benjamin Wallfish. It's reminiscent of, I was reminiscing about the music from the first Mortal Kombat, and the first Mortal Kombat movie that came out in the 1980s, and that's what it kind of reminded me of. And it seems to me that some of that music was incorporated into the score of this film, and it goes without saying that it was fantastic. I feel like composers for movies they rarely miss, and so um, it was pretty good. As I mentioned, this is the second attempt at the live action sequel, and I think to me this sequel for the current Mortal Kombat series did a better job than the previous sequel from the 1990s Mortal Kombat series did. I think that the sequel that came out for Mortal Kombat in the 1990s basically killed that franchise. It was like, if it were successful, obviously they would have made a Mortal Kombat 3. I'm pretty sure they would have made as many more Mortal Kombats as they possibly could. And as a matter of fact, even though that Mortal Kombat 2 from the 1990s was not, would not be considered a success, they continue to franchise in other ways. There was a Mortal Kombat cartoon. There was a Mortal Kombat live action series that came on syndication. And then later on, and I think in the early 2000s, there was like a Mortal Kombat web series. I think it's still on HBO Max. I'm not exactly sure if it's still there. And there were various ways that they tried to continue in live action. So during the pandemic, when they came out with a reboot of the live action series, Mortal Kombat, it was an attempt to revive the live action movie series. And it was a little bit more successful. The thing that I didn't like about that original movie was the introduction of Cole Young. And because they had so many there are so many characters in the Mortal Kombat universe, so many characters that they could have used. They didn't need to invent a new character for audiences. Like, the movie they wanted to tell is like, well, we're going to take someone who's not in Mortal Kombat, and through this character, the audience will learn about the mythology or the world building that we're doing in this movie. And I understand what they do. They do it in a lot of movies where they basically have a character that's a proxy for the audience so that they could tell the story. It's easier to do exposition. It's easier to do world building. We can get a character from Earth and turn them into a Mortal Kombat character or whatever fantasy character that you need that person to be in order to pull the audiences in. And I understand the need to do that, but they didn't need to invent a character. And then the Mortal Kombat is a particular circumstance where if you're going to create a character, you want to create a character that the audience would want to play as a video game character, because this is based off of a video game, and Cole isn't a character that many Mortal Kombat fans would want to play as a Mortal Kombat character. At least I didn't. He felt lame. It's like a movie executive's attempt to create a Mortal Kombat character and failing. And it was unnecessary because Mortal Kombat has so many characters. They probably have over 100 characters that they could have chosen. In other news, I also have my reservations about Karl Urban. I love Karl Urban as an actor, but I don't think I've ever seen him as playing a martial artist character. And I don't know why I would have this particular reservation about Karl Urban. I'm pretty sure that most of the actors used in Mortal Kombat, I don't know if most of them have a background in martial arts. And I didn't care, especially in the first movie. I didn't care if they had a background in martial arts. That's what stunt people are for. So as long as the characters draw me in and the stunts are seamless, I shouldn't care. But for some reason, I had this reservation about Karl Urban. And my reservations were unfounded because it's like, it doesn't matter if he knows martial arts or not. The only thing that matters is if the filmmakers can create the illusion that he's a martial artist. And they did. Admittedly, this film basically repeats the plot of the previous Mortal Kombat movie. So the plot of the first Mortal Kombat movie is that there's a tournament taking place. Raiden is looking for people to defend the Earth from an encroaching dimension, and he gets like a regular dude that doesn't know about this supernatural world, and the regular dude is doubtful, but then they basically bring him along enough to where he's now part of the family, and now he's fighting for Earthrealm. That was the first movie. The second movie is basically doing the same thing, except in the first movie it was an unknown character named Cole Young. In the second movie, it is a well-known character named Johnny Cage, played by Carl Urban. He did a fantastic job as Johnny Cage. And the main difference between the first movie and this movie, in the first movie, even though it's called Mortal Kombat, it's supposed to be based on a fighting tournament. No fighting tournament took place in that first movie, and that's kind of a disappointment. It was all basically street fighting. In the second movie, we actually get to the tournament. The second movie is all about the tournament. So it was great. It was great that they actually got to the tournament in this movie. So that's the main difference. Given that this is more of a redo of the first movie, they did a lot of improvements over what they did with the first movie. And it's important to note that the first movie was during the pandemic, and so instead of releasing it in theaters, actually they released it in theaters and on television at the same time. So I think I saw this, or maybe I didn't see it in theaters. Maybe I only saw it on television. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they only premiered it on television. I'm pretty now that I think about it, without doing any research, without doing any internet search, I believe that this was a streaming only event because of the pandemic. And since the first movie was streaming only, I feel like the filmmakers probably decided that since Mortal Kombat 2 was going to premiere in theaters, it would give them a chance to improve on the story that they were trying to write for what went to the streaming services. This is my own headcanon. This is not something that can be proven with actual evidence. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm just speculating. It's like this movie was a second chance to get the story right. And I think that looking at it from that perspective, it seems like they achieved their goals in improving the story. They had outstanding action and stunts, as what you would expect. Like, this is people who watch this movie are basically going there to see the fighting and the action. There needs to be a story, a good story that ties it all together, but it doesn't have to be an outstanding story. As long as the action sequences are great, they can make up for a story that's maybe less than perfect. Along with the fighting sequences, you had the costumes, the settings, the FX, the music. They all came together very nicely. And my expectations weren't especially high for this movie, but it turned out to be a joyful experience. Like, I really enjoyed what was going on. I really enjoyed the characterizations of like Shao Kahn or Jade or many of the Mortal Kombat characters. And the movie, the story in the movie was not spectacular, but like I said, the action sequences kind of make up for it. There were some cheesy moments, but it didn't like outweigh my overall joyful experience of this movie. So I really liked it. And IMDb has it at 6.5. Rotten Tomato has it at 64% for critics and 87% for the audience. So those are my thoughts on Mortal Kombat 2. And I know it's kind of late talking about these movies. These movies have been out for a while. They're probably on streaming already. But in case you haven't seen them, those are my thoughts. And maybe you want to check it out. Tell me what you thought of Mortal Kombat 2. Once again, my email is friends@backlickcinema.com. And the socials, I can be reached on at Backlick Cinema. So thanks for listening. And I am in the belief that the next film that we do, I'll go ahead and do Quickly Down Under. When I realized that I'm going to have to do a little bit of research on that movie because there are some historical evidence, or I'm sorry, some historical events that are incorporated in that movie that when I did this rewatch of Quickly Down Under, I didn't realize that. It's like I've forgotten about this movie. This is only the second time I watched that movie, and I realized, oh, this movie is deeper than what I remember. So I'll have to do a little bit of digging and research on that on the events that surround that movie, and hopefully I can get that out for you next week. And I think I'm refurbished, refreshed, I'm reupholstered. So it's a break that I took. I didn't realize that I was taking a break, and it's a break that I didn't know that I needed. But thanks for listening. I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate the messages that you leave either on social media or on YouTube or the emails that I get. Thank you for sending those messages. Let me know what you think. Again, my name is Zoe Richardson. Be loving, be generous, be courteous, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.